after coaching BDMs and seeing the people that actually did that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their success was wild. I mean, I've seen people add 50, 60 doors per month because they asked. Welcome back to another episode of Grow Outbound. I am joined today by my wonderful co-host, Ben. Ben, how are you?
I'm great, Kristen. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. It's a lovely afternoon.
Yeah, it sure is. And I'm really enjoying getting to do this. I think this is our first, for you and I, it's our first foray into podcasting. And yeah, it's been interesting.
Yes, because before this, I have never done a podcast before. And it's been great to be able to do it. It's easier than I thought that it was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And who knows, maybe people are listening to this and being like, gosh, these guys are amateurs.
No way. I think I think that when people just heard that this was our first time doing a podcast, they're like, whoa, you sound freaking awesome.
Blew their mind.
Yeah, we did.
What kind of podcast do you like to listen to?
Let's see. What kind of podcast does Kristen like to listen to? That's a great question. I really like podcasts that are stories.
Yeah.
So there's some podcasts out there where it's like multiple segments of telling a story together. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of podcasts that I like to listen to. There's also one that takes an album music,
mm-hmm.
and they go through each and every song and they talk about the backtracks and where did those come from, and they talk about the album as an entirety, and they break down each and every track, and they do it in seasons. And that is like podcasts that teach me something, but I'm not big into like news podcasts or anything. That I want to things that I'm interested in, and I love music and I love stories. I love learning things. What about you?
I enjoy listening to industry podcasts. So similarly, I like to learn. So always enjoy getting to hear from folks in the industry, whether they're a business owner or on the vendor side. There's a couple golf podcasts that I really like.
I have learned that over the last few days that you love golf.
Oh, I've mentioned it once or twice.
Just like 3 times maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Some other sports ones as well. Yeah, I'm really into football as well. So yeah, there's a wide variety, but yeah, I think the ones that are the best, it helps having an entertaining host and subject matter that is generally interesting to you. So.
Absolutely. So golf and football. You play golf. Did you ever play football?
No, I've been a football fan. I was like 5'3" until I was 16 years old. I didn't hit my growth spurt till I was 16, and so I was a little bit too small to play football. Played soccer, but I've always enjoyed watching football.
And do you have a particular team that you root for?
Yes. I'm originally from Maryland, and I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. I grew up about 30 minutes west of Baltimore, but the Ravens always used to do their training camp at a small college that's very close to where I grew up. So they came to town in 1996, and pretty much every year during the summer would go watch them do training camp, which was awesome. And, get autographs and pictures with players and stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Is there a rival team that they have? Like one rival in particular?
Yeah. Our biggest rival is the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is, it's pretty interesting. In my travels as an adult, what I found is that Steelers fans are everywhere. And yeah, that's all I'll say about that. But yeah, Steelers are Steelers. That's the rival for sure. Yeah.
So what was fun about our intro there was leads into what we're going to be talking about today.
And I didn't even realize what you're doing there.
Which is spectacular.
Wow.
So what we're talking about today is the art of discovery. And if you'll go back and re-listen to that, I found out quite a lot of things about Ben in a matter of just a few minutes, and you didn't even know that it was happening.
No, I didn't. Yeah, it's excellent. Well done.
Thank you. So when it comes to discovery, Ben, can you kind of run us through what does that mean? Like we're saying discovery, but how does that pertain to sales? What
Yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah. So we're obviously talking about discovery as part of a sales process. And when you think about um, really the movements that a lead or a prospect is going to take through your process, ultimately you're starting at a point where maybe they have a little bit of knowledge about what you do. They met you at a conference or a trade show would be applicable for our world,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you have been calling that person, emailing that person, sending them mail, um, and so they really have limited amount of information about what you do, and I think where discovery has a distinct place in the process is as salespeople we like to talk, right? And we're really eager to tell people all the great things that we do and all whether it's a product or a service, like hear all the great things about it. But I think everyone has probably had the experience of being interested in someone's product or service, and just sort of being talked at about
Yes.
it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I know it's kind of a gross analogy, but we use the term vomit all over
Oh,
people
word vomit.
with
That's the
yeah, with
worst.
your with all this great stuff that's in your head. And so what I think what is distinct about discovery is the idea that before I even talk to you about what it is that I have to offer, my first step is to learn more about you and what it is that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the hardest lessons to learn is to be quiet.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember on calls early in my career whenever I realized that I was talking too much, I would physically have to put my hand over my mouth to stop talking
Yeah.
because I would say something and then I would say the same thing a different way and then I would say that same thing a third way
Yeah.
and then just keep talking so I would physically just have to mute myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed the same thing about myself. It's this idea of kind of talking in circles,
Yes.
right? I feel like I'm having to explain something. I'm not asking questions, so I'm
Mhm.
not really offering the opportunity for you to give feedback other
Right.
than your body language. And so what I tend to do is I can just say the same thing over and over again in different ways
Yes.
because I'm waiting for you to elicit some sort of response.
Right.
But really, I'm not offering you much of an opportunity to do that,
Right.
other than like for your eyes to go, "Oh yeah, that sounds good," and then I'm like, "Okay, now I've said something that registers." But yeah, I mean, this is not like this isn't some revolutionary idea. Salespeople generally are social; and they like to
Yes.
talk.
And to me, the discovery portion of the sales process is the most important thing that we can do as salespeople.
Mm,
Because if you do good discovery, then your pitch or whenever you're talking about the product is then tailored specifically to the person that you're talking to,
right.
which then makes closing that much easier. And a lot of times, salespeople want to jump to say, "Hey, I can't close.
Mm,
I don't know why I can't close this person." And if we go back and we listen to their calls or we go over what happened at their on-site consultation, we usually find they were just talking way too much and you
right.
actually don't know anything about the prospect because in the discovery portion to me there's specific questions that we want to have answered and that's why somebody is looking to change and why that change has to happen now. Like those are two key pieces. And once we have those, the third one that we can talk about is why us. But
Mm.
we can't possibly start talking about our services until we know the specific things about our prospects.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And you brought up a good point there. I at a previous job, we used a software that actually listened to all of our calls. And one of the
Oh,
metrics it
nice.
looked for in the discovery phase was what's your talk time, right? And I think there's probably people would say different things, but
Mhm.
really when you think about it, I mean, in a discovery conversation, if all you're doing is asking really good questions and listening, your talk percentage should be like you should be talking like 20% of
Yeah.
that conversation. And really, obviously the quality of your question matters.
Mhm.
Don't ask yes or no questions,
Right.
right? We're looking for things that get people talking
Yeah.
ultimately. Yep.
Absolutely. And another stuck that I have found for people is how do I even get into this process? And like
Yeah.
how do I start asking questions? Because the other part with discovery is we don't want to make our prospect feel like they're being interrogated. Like we
Right.
don't want to make them feel like there is a wrong answer. We want to make sure that we're using soft language around the questions that we're asking. And so then how do you get somebody into discovery and get them in that mode of answering questions?
Yeah, I think obviously, as is always the case, like being able to spend a little bit of time building rapport
Mhm.
on the front end. As humans, we want to relate to other people,
Right.
and so yeah, I think one of the things that I definitely try to do is on the front end, like before we really even get into the heart of
Mhm.
the conversation, finding ways to relate to the person that I'm talking to.
Sure.
A really easy way to do that, obviously, is to hear about where people are from and where they
Mhm.
are, and um, you know, it doesn't. It comes more naturally to some people than others, but I think really you want to kind of bring the walls down a little bit.
Right.
If you're coming into a conversation with someone that maybe is a little bit apprehensive about the feeling of being sold to, their expectation when they enter the conversation is that sort of that word vomit. Like they're
Yeah.
expecting I'm gonna get on this call, you're gonna tell me a bunch of stuff, and then I'm gonna go think about whether or not I can utilize it for my business.
Yep.
And if that's the buying process that someone is accustomed to, then yeah, it may take a little bit of time to get that person to open up. But this idea that we all want to relate to others is, I think that's just a human thing. And so having the opportunity to build some rapport, I
Mhm.
think is really good. And then I just think being taking a genuine approach,
Yeah.
like it's one thing if, let's say you were a property manager that I was
Mhm.
looking to sell to. If I just came in and immediately started hitting you with what software do you use? How
Yep.
many doors do you manage? How many people on your team? Like that feels much more like an interrogation than to
Mhm.
come in and say, Kristen, how did you get into property management?
Right.
Right? Because now you're offering them the opportunity to tell
Mhm.
a story.
Absolutely. And one thing that I would look for too when I was a BDM is I was calling on investors and landlords in the city that I lived in, the city
Hmm.
that I went to high school in, that I was very familiar with. So I would take a little bit of initiative and put in a little bit of work before a call.
Yeah.
And I would figure out, where are these properties at that these people own? Do I know anything about that area of town? If I do, then one of my first questions would be, hey, I see that you own this house on 123 Main Street. Have you ever been to that restaurant around the corner?
Yeah.
And just
Great
start it
example.
with something that, really brings their walls down, because you're right, people are on the defensive as soon as we get on the phone because people hate to be sold to.
Yep.
Like they hate to be sold to. And we as salespeople, it's not our job to be super salesy. Our job is to enter into discovery mode to truly find out, is what we have to offer a good fit for this person? Because
Hmm.
if it's not, you're going to learn that in discovery, because the worst thing you can do is take somebody through and make a really hard sale and then get to the end and realize, oh, we actually don't want to work with this person.
Yeah.
Their properties are in the wrong area of town. They're really grumpy and they don't want to talk to us, or they don't have the financial stamina to pay for things that are happening with the properties. So it's important in the discovery part, not just that we're trying to break down the walls of the prospect, but also we're trying to learn, would they be a good fit for us?
Yeah.
Just like they're shopping us, we're also shopping them. And the discovery portion is a good place to ask those questions to figure out if we're going to be a good fit together, because that's really what it is collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction, it's almost in some ways it's a confidence thing for you as the salesperson.
Mhm.
We've all been in situations where gosh, I really need to close more
Oh,
deals. I
yeah.
really need to get this closed. And if you're approaching the conversation from that sort of position, then it becomes almost on a subconscious level, like more, how can I fit you into the box of what I think you need so that I
Mhm.
can close a deal versus, hey, we're this conversation is a two-way street. I'm here to learn about you, you're here to learn about me.
Yep.
And ultimately at the end of the conversation, we'll decide whether or not it's worth going any further with this. And I think that tends not to be the average experience
Yep.
for people. And so by taking that approach, it comes across a lot more genuine and laid back than, hey, I'm here to tell you how great we are. Yeah, that's a very good point on your part. I'm curious. Obviously, I've done plenty of discovery calls in my past job and current job. I'd love to hear from you, having been a BDM and coached BDMs, specifically as it relates to a discovery call with a property owner. What are some of the things that you were really hoping to extract from that conversation? What were some of the most valuable things that you wanted to hear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing that whenever I was entering into discovery early on, whenever I was a BDM, was I don't think I was doing discovery in like a genuine enough way
Mm,
because I was listening for pain points or I was listening
right.
for keywords and I was like, oh, what are they going to say? Because, oh, if they say that, then I'm going to say this. And then if they say that, then I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
And I would pre plan out the calls, which didn't allow me to be present like in that
Mhm.
moment and truly listening to what they're saying because people will tell you half truths and you have to know when to dig further. And so I was doing what I would like to call like surface level discovery, where
Okay.
I was just asking questions of where's your property located? How much do you want it to rent out for? Have you worked with a manager in the past? Have you, what was your experience like with that property manager? Why did you leave them?
Yeah.
And I was asking like those surface level questions. When I flipped my mindset more towards this person has a complex situation going on and
Mhm.
I need to listen to what they're not saying. Not just the words they're saying, but what are they not saying? Where are they adding in awkward pauses? And where are they because a lot of this is happening on
Yeah.
the phone. So I don't have the luxury of like body language right away. This is all
Yeah.
on the phone. So I have to be very much listening into those pauses and where inflections happen or they're saying something and it's just not that's interesting. I'm curious. Could you tell me more about that?
Mhm.
So for me, I was listening for more verbal cues, like
Right.
verbal things that they were saying, more so than like words that they were saying. I was listening for like the subtext, and I was really trying to, just be present in that moment and listen. But the things that really made my ears perk up were like red flags of
Yeah.
I've had 4 property managers in the last 5 years. Oh,
Right.
tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Why? You're probably the problem. But I was listening for like the key things of who is my ideal customer? Does this person fit into that ideal customer box? And if it was too easy, then I had to ask way more questions. Like if they were just saying
Yeah.
all of the right things, I may have been being secret shopped, but that's
Well,
really
sure.
in the discovery portion, more so just staying present. And I had to stop playing mental chess of
Yeah.
trying to be just like a rebuttal ninja and trying to figure out
Yeah.
what they were going to say. And if they say this, oh, I'm so excited to say this and bring this point. So for me, it was just kind of taking a step back and being able to listen in the discovery portion, which I think is the most important thing that we can do.
Now, I'm imagining that there are some people out here listening
Hmm.
who their mind is going to, okay, great. Let's say that that's the approach that I want to take with my prospect. What do I do when the person that I'm talking to in person, on the phone, on Zoom, you can tell they don't have any patience for all my questions. They're
Yep.
just, let's get down to brass tacks, right? Like
Yeah.
very cut and dry. How have you handled situations like that in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I would say to someone is, hey, I appreciate you calling in and I would absolutely love you to tell you about what we charge because that's the first thing, right? It's two scenarios. Number one,
Right.
here's all of my pain and here's all the terrible things that are happening. And situation number two is what do you charge,
Yep.
right? It's usually what do you charge people that are like, just tell me, right?
Right.
Absolutely, Ben. I would love to run you through our pricing. In order for me to be able to give you the best answers, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
Mm.
Person I'm not automatically is like, no, can you just tell me what you charge? Absolutely. Well, I can get into that and I would love to share our pricing with you. However, we have a little bit of a tiered pricing structure. We have a couple of different plans that we offer. So I want to make sure I'm recommending the right one to you.
Mm.
No, I just want to know what you charge. At that point, for me personally, I say, hey, you know what? That's fantastic. Actually, if you go over to our website, www.propertymanagement.com,
Right.
all of our pricing is listed there. I'll email that over to you. And whenever you're ready to talk about property management services, I would be more than happy to have that conversation with you.
So two things come to mind immediately from what you just said. The first is I love that you asked for permission
Right.
to ask the questions, right? Hey, I absolutely understand, in order for me to, get a better understanding of your situation, I'd love
Mhm.
to ask you a few questions. Would that be okay? That that's an important thing, right?
Right.
And that's helpful. The other thing is what's coming to mind for me is this person that is just so fixated on pricing. I'm thinking to myself in the moment as the salesperson, yeah, my sense is maybe that this person is not going to be the best
Oh,
client for me
absolutely.
because if they're fixated on price and they're coming to you looking for price, they're also going to leave you for a
Yes.
price. And they don't show any interest in understanding the service and what they're going to get for that price, for instance, then the odds are, yeah, this might be a tough client or
Absolutely.
somebody that ultimately doesn't fit my ideal profile.
100%. And I think that that's key as, you know, doing sales for a property management company. You are the frontline defense from bringing on wrong fit clients.
Right.
And wrong fit clients cost a company so much money in time, in effort, in a lot of times actual money
Yeah.
that has to go out the door to appease this person, to get them off your back, to get them to go away, to get them to do whatever. So as a business development manager or even somebody doing sales, especially if you're the owner of the company, my gosh, protect your company
Right.
and have the courage to say no. And I think that that's something that the reason why discovery is so important is because at the end of that, you may be the one to have to say, "Hey, it's not me, it's you." Like
Yeah.
we're just
Sure.
not going to be a good fit. Or my favorite way to let people down at the end of discovery is, "Hey, Ben, what it seems like you're looking for is a company who can be really attentive and you're looking for some one-on-one personalized meetings every single month. You're wanting somebody to go over your owner statement with you our systems are just not designed to be able to give you that kind of attention. So I don't think that we're going to be the best fit for you. I think you'd
Mm.
be happier going to shop at and I would give other companies names. I
Yeah.
knew all the other property managers in San Antonio and I'd say, "Hey, you should probably talk to this property manager
Yep.
and just let them go." And I don't think that that's something that is done enough because we want to win business.
Right.
And sometimes by winning business, we end up hurting ourselves because we take on clients that are not
Yeah.
right fits.
Right. Yeah. If your process is just to say yes and promise too much, ultimately, that that's going to lead to frustration for them and for you later.
Mhm.
And you probably know in the back of your head, if you are like giving into that stuff, yeah, I'm gonna regret this later.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like you know it immediately of like, "Oh, no, that was bad."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you get to, like, having to send out the contract, and then you just don't do it, and then
Right.
now that person is frustrated, and that usually leads to negative Google reviews, and
Right.
negative Google reviews are bad.
Right. I think the other interesting aspect of discovery is, trying to understand someone's goals
Right.
as well, because I think in a lot of ways you can get a picture into who this person is. And, it offers them the opportunity to talk more about what they're excited about and what they're passionate about.
Yep.
To talk to somebody who owns investment real estate and hear them say, well, my goal is to be able to pass this on to my kids, right?
Yes.
Or to be able to fund their college, right? Now you're getting to a level with this person where we're having a conversation that's much more than just about property management.
Absolutely.
We're getting to know who they are as a person and what they really value. So I'd be curious to hear from your experience, like how you've seen that work or where you've seen the benefits of understanding someone's end game
Yep.
in conversations.
So this is something that I be completely honest, didn't do as a BDM.
Yeah.
Like I did not ask for people's goals. It wasn't until I started coaching BDMs and learned from people that were more successful than me, like the people who owned the consulting company that I worked at. People have spent years just like understanding sales as to how important asking for goals was.
Right.
And once I understood that importance, I was mad at myself because I felt like I left a lot of money on the table as a BDM, where I was like, how many more people could I have closed if I would have done that? Because I think that it's just undervalued of goals because people say it's just property management. They're just accidental landlords or they're just looking for this. no, there's something deeper that's bringing them here, and that's a sophistication that is being brought to the property management industry, but I don't see it adopted widely enough because when
Yeah.
I was coaching BDMs, I was like, "But what's their goal?" "Oh, well, they just, they want to change property management companies." "Why?" Because they said they're charging them too much." "Why?
Right.
Why? 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 Why?"
Right.
And most people couldn't tell me that. But if I know now why somebody's looking to change, why that has to happen now, and what their goals are, there's no way I'm not going to close them
Yeah.
because now whenever they bring me an objection, now I'm just gonna have a conversation with them because I learned so much about it in the discovery portion of like, yeah, but then your goal was
Yep.
that you wanted to purchase these properties to be able to pay for your children's college.
Yep.
Like that was the goal with this. So us having an eviction protection program, us having a rent protection program, while it may cost you $50 more per month, it's going to protect you in case something goes wrong so then we can have a
Right.
long-term return on these assets. It's a totally different conversation than okay, well then we just won't charge you for that. Or
Yeah.
like we're able to have a deeper conversation on that. But that is something that I didn't do as a BDM, but after coaching BDMs and seeing the people that actually did that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean their success was wild. I mean, I've seen people add 50, 60 doors per month because they asked
Right.
and they asked what people's goals were and they just saw exceptional results from that.
Well, I think the other thing that does is you've now moved the conversation away from sort of the basics of what has been pretty transactional property
Right.
management. And some of the folks that I really admire in the industry, I think that they would say that they consider themselves to be advisors for their
Right.
clients, not order takers. And
Yep.
so if you're having that kind of conversation and you know what their goals are, then guess what? When one of your clients wants to sell one of their properties, if I know that my client over here is looking to add properties, I'm
Yeah.
now looking out for them and saying,
Exactly.
hey, I know that you're looking to grow your portfolio because these are your ultimate goals. I have this client that needs to sell their property. Are you interested in taking a look at it?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, now you have gone from almost losing a management contract to potentially keeping that in house for one
Absolutely.
of your clients. And so, again, like on the front end, we're talking about some very basic, just adding a few questions to your
Mhm.
process. But when you think about the implications that could have further down the road, it really makes it seem like a no-brainer that this is the way that you kind of begin your sales process.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite terms that has been coined by Jeremy Pound and the Rent Scale team is I am your landlord advocate. Like I
Mm,
am your
yeah,
trusted advisor. Like these terms are ones that didn't exist, but to hear the success that BDMs have had by using those and listening to calls where that is used, the way that then the prospect starts to treat that sales professional is totally different because now they don't see them as a salesperson. No, you're my trusted advisor. Like you're somebody who is looking out not just for yourself, but for me. And that I think is where the sophistication in property management is starting to really take place is it's not just signing up because
right.
you can't just sign up for property management online. Like it's not something you put in your Amazon cart and then you purchase it. You have to
Yeah,
talk to somebody about it. And the companies that are using that language of a landlord advocate or I am your trusted advisor are seeing better success than those that are like, I'm a sales rep. I'm a
yeah.
business development manager. Nobody knows what that means.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And ultimately what we're talking about is building relationships
Right.
with people. And, you know, the nature of the relationships that you have in a lot of ways determines the experience
Right.
because we know that in this business things are going to go wrong later on. There's
Yeah.
going to be,
Not
hey,
if, when.
yeah, you've got to replace an HVAC system, or
Yep.
we've got to do the roof, or this tenant is late and we might have to evict them. And in the moment, it's easy to have a very emotional response to that as a
Mhm.
property owner, like, oh man, right? But if your level of trust and relationship with your property manager is well established, then the interactions that follow, right, are different
Yes.
than, oh, I signed up with you because you were the cheapest property
Yep.
manager and there wasn't a thorough process that went into understanding ultimately what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately being able to bring the conversation back to, yeah, I know, I know it's not great that you've got to replace the HVAC, but the good news is let's talk about how your property is appreciating and the long-term implications of that investment
Right.
that is still going to help you get to your goals. It's a momentary setback, but ultimately you're still on the path to doing what you're setting out to doing.
And what's crazy is that we're talking about maybe a 10-minute conversation with
Oh
somebody
yeah.
in the discovery
Yep.
process. That ripple effect is able to solve so many problems down the line. And it's by taking 10 extra minutes on a call and asking questions and building a relationship with somebody, because it truly is. It's 10, 15 minutes. Because if you're peppering someone with questions for like 30 minutes, they're going to be annoyed and hang up the phone and never answer your call again.
Yep.
However, if you're allowing your prospect to talk, they're going to be so excited to talk to you again
Yeah.
because you have given them the space to talk.
Yep.
And if you're talking over them or you're talking at them, well, it is no wonder you get ghosted. Like, I wouldn't answer your call again, but people, if you just hold that space and almost facilitate a conversation for someone to have with themselves, where you're
Yep.
asking questions, they're now talking it out and they're convincing themselves, oh, I should probably do this. Why? Because this person
Yep.
gets me. This person is letting me talk. And people think you just have the best conversation with them, even though they're doing 90% of the talking.
Right. Well, and I think what's funny too is like some of the people I know that are the best at this, they are remembering all of the small details.
Yes.
Even some of the like what I would call more like rapport based
Mm-hmm.
discovery questions. Oh, where are you from? Where'd you go to school? Like learning that stuff. And then, or remembering someone's kids' names,
Yeah.
right? Like people appreciate that
Yeah.
you're really listening to them and, hey, I saw so and so had a birthday, or, how
Yep.
are your kids doing? I know school's about to start, right? Like that stuff is meaningful and is only going to strengthen your relationships.
Yes, I remember early in my career when I was a dialer, I was talking to somebody and he offhandedly mentioned that he owned like 100 pairs of Nike, like Jordans or
Yeah.
something like that. And he was just like a total sneakerhead. And so, but my boss was also huge. Like my boss had an entire wall filled with Jordans and it,
Mm,
it was crazy. And he told me about this release of this really rare shoe. So then I called that prospect that I just knew this about
yeah.
him. It wasn't even like scheduled in my CRM to call him, but my boss told me. So I called him and I was able to then push him through to get him pre-qualified to get him in the car to going and buying a house because I made this
Right.
connection and it was all just like something he said offhand.
Yep.
So the very small details mean the most to people because it's like, wow, somebody actually listened to me.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, I think that kind of leads into what we wanted to close with, which was to talk about some of our favorite discovery
Oh,
questions.
that's good.
Maybe this could be, we're going to have different sides of this
Yeah.
because, I have sold to property managers.
Right.
You have coached BDMs and sold
Hmm.
to, property owners. So maybe some of your favorite discovery questions you've asked
Okay.
or that have been asked of you, if, in a sales process.
That's good. Do you have some off the top of your head?
Well, there's one that immediately comes to mind for me because it was pretty
Hmm.
recent. My last job, we were purchasing a learning management software,
Hmm.
and in one of the calls that I had, uh, they totally just off the wall, like, so what was your first concert? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, but it sparked like a fun conversation.
Yeah.
And this person was about my age, so we
Hmm.
had, we both knew each other's first concert. We're like, oh yeah, I remember you used to listen to them, and it was something that was just very fun and basic.
Right.
But it ultimately, back to what we were talking about at the beginning
Hmm.
about just being able to relate to people, it was something that I immediately was like, oh, I feel more comfortable talking to this person,
Yeah.
even though it seemed pretty off the wall
Absolutely.
and out of place. But it really was great, actually. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that
Yeah.
on a discovery call. For me, I feel that my approach into my discovery is very like logical. Like my
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't know,
yeah.
that is the way that my brain operates is like
Yeah.
logic. So the first thing I always like jump off with is just like, tell me about your property.
Mm.
Tell me about what you got going on.
Yeah.
And then from there, I find small pieces that then I can relate to. and then we can tell stories back and forth, and then it kind of builds on each other. Like for me, I don't think I would have the confidence to just be like, oh, hey, what's the first concert you went to?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless I knew you.
Yeah.
Right. That is just not the
Right.
way that my brain operates. So for me to jump in discovery,
Yep.
I always started like basic questions.
Yeah.
But I love that. I
Yeah.
love that person's confidence to be able to be like,
well,
me.
And to be fair, they didn't lead off with it. It wasn't the first question. So they
that would have been even better.
You know,
would you
maybe,
have continued the call?
well, yeah. You know, I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier. It sort of depends on the type of person you're talking to. And so if you're talking to someone and you feel like you've got a really high level of rapport and you're relating very well, then yeah, you could get a little bit more off the wall with your questions.
Oh, absolutely.
But I like what you said from the standpoint of it's like you're taking a broad approach.
Right.
And then from there, you're guiding the conversation with what comes in. You're not being so specific that it couldn't spark more conversation. Right. You're being broad enough to say, tell me about yourself, you know, or something that's allowing them the freedom to go wherever they want with it.
And so going back to, like I said, when we're taking a property management call, there's the two scenarios, right? The number one is, oh, everything is on fire and everything sucks. And this is why everything is so bad. And then the other part is the blunt person. I found that it's just much easier opening rapport with those people that tell you their entire story because they're like, oh, and then my daughter, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Oh, you have a daughter? Me too. Like,
yeah.
How old is she? What are we doing? And so finding those openings in the conversation. And that's what I think I found the balance of like knowing when to go in for like those rapport building questions and when for those super dry people to just kind of start the conversation and start in building trust along the way to then be able to ask some of those more direct questions, or not direct, but more get to know you questions. Because for like super dry people, I always like talking to them because it's a game in my head where I'm like, can I make you like me by the end of this call?
Right.
And with them, I listen for the small things that they say, the little offhanded comments of like, oh, that's something that my son would say. Oh, you have a son? Tell me about that.
Yep.
And then just asking. And I think that too with discovery, the tone, right? If I say, you have a son? Tell me about that. It's totally different than, oh, you have a son? That's fantastic. Tell me, right? That it's easier to have discovery calls with the tone that we're taking.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of what you said there that I think is really true is the idea that you're not approaching every single conversation exactly the same way. This kind of goes back to the art of it, which is I'm not going to sit there and write down a list of 10 discovery questions and go line by line through them. A good salesperson is going to read the situation.
Yes.
And in some situations, maybe the best thing to do with this person, because you're relating really well, is just build rapport really heavily, right? And you can read, okay, yeah, that's what this person values. And at the end of the day, my price is my price and our process is our process. But I really like you, so I want to buy from you, right? Like there are people out there like that versus, you know, the person who's very dry, very to the point. And in that case, if you sat there and just tried to build rapport with them for 30 minutes, they're probably hanging up the phone.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not going to make it through the whole conversation. So I think it's a real skill to be able to tailor your approach to an individual conversation based on the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
The other thing that came to mind for me as you were talking was, and obviously I would ask this of property management company owners. I think the principle could still apply to a BDM, but hey, what are your goals for the next 5-10 years? Right? Because back to what we talked about with goals before, like that's going to tell you a lot about who they are as a person. And when I would talk to a property management company owner, not everybody wants to build a giant company that's managing 1,000 doors. Some people want to be small and lean and have, you know, it just be themselves or maybe one or two other team members. They want to work with owners that they really like.
Right.
And if you're taking that approach, you can still build an extremely profitable company.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you know, not everyone is going to have, they don't want the same outcome.
Right.
And, you know, in property management, you're going to talk to folks that, yeah, maybe they're an accidental landlord and, you know, they just want to see how this goes. Right. And decide if it's a long-term investment for them.
And that would be totally different discovery than the person who says, yeah, my goal is to have, it's always 100 doors in 10 years. For some reason, so many people would say, I want 100 doors. Yeah, we all do. But,
Yeah.
but those are different discovery questions that we would tailor to both of those.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know, the other thing that I'll let this be kind of my final point. I just to emphasize that the questions that you're asking on the front end they're ultimately things that you can use further in the process.
Yes.
And to continue to come back to that not only shows that you care about what they care about, but that you were listening. And at the end of the day, people want to feel like you were listening to them.
Yes, because I think that the sticking points in the rest of the sales process are, how do I follow up with this person? How do I close them? The answer to that is the discovery that you did. If I know that you need your property on the market by March 15th, well, then my follow-up to you is gonna be like, "Hey, Ben, remember you told me that you wanted your property on the market by March 15th. What's the first today? And we need to make sure that we do that because we don't want you to be paying double mortgage whenever you move into your next house, blah, blah, blah." Like, I'm gonna restate all of the things that we talked about in discovery, which just makes the rest of the process easier. So my final thought is, if you do your discovery really, really well and you learn a lot about your prospect in the beginning, closing them, following up with them, and retaining them as a customer gets that much easier.
Yep. Well, and we'll do a future podcast on the follow up and how that looks. One of my favorite things that I've heard someone say is, that scenario, maybe someone's not getting back to you, or they're not making a decision. I'm just curious.
I love whenever a question starts that way.
Has something changed, or did something change? You told me you wanted to be on the market by March 15th. I'm just curious. Did something change? No. I still need it on the market. Okay. Let's keep going. We'll do more on that in a future episode. But Kristen, I really enjoyed this conversation. It's great to hear your experience as a BDM, but also coaching BDMs on how to do this better. And no doubt you've encountered quite a few good salespeople over the years that have mastered this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for listening. Until next time.